From Nixon's Watergate to Clinton's affair and Trump's impeachments, political scandals have rocked America for decades. Get ready as we dive into the 10 most explosive moments that exposed the dark side of power and shook the nation to its core. Now let's see the 4 biggest political scandals in U.S. history. The most famous political scandal is the Watergate scandal in the 70s. The Watergate scandal was the reason behind the only resignation of a sitting president in the American history. Watergate exposed systemic abuses of power and led to widespread reforms, including the strengthening of campaign finance laws and increased transparency in government operations. It all started in 1972 with a break-in at the Democratic National Committee headquarters in the Watergate complex. 5 men, tied to President Richard Nixon's re-election campaign, were caught red-handed. But this was the tip of the iceberg. At first, the Nixon administration dismissed the break-in as a minor incident. However, 2 young Washington Post journalists, at the time, Bob Woodward and Carl Bernstein, pursued the story relentlessly. With help from an anonymous source known as Deep Throat, they uncovered a web of corruption, secret payments, and attempts to obstruct justice. Nixon's administration had been actively involved in covering up the break-in and sabotaging political opponents. The scandal reached its climax in 1973 when televised Senate hearings exposed the administration's involvement to the public. The discovery of Nixon's secret recording system in the Oval Office became the turning point. When investigators demanded the tapes, Nixon initially refused, citing executive privilege. The release of the tapes, particularly the smoking gun recording, revealed Nixon's direct role in orchestrating the cover-up. Watergate's aftermath was profound. The scandal shattered public trust in government and led to significant reforms, including stricter campaign finance laws, stronger protections for whistleblowers, and greater transparency in government operations. It remains a defining moment in American history, a cautionary tale about the abuse of power at the highest levels. The deep voice who helped solving the case was later revealed to be FBI Associate Director Mark Felt, and both Woodward and Bernstein became 2 of the most famous journalists in the American history. 2. Iran-Contra. The Iran-Contra affair, or what is known as the Iran-Gate, was a shocking political scandal in the 1980s that rocked the Reagan administration. Here's the twist. U.S. officials secretly sold arms to Iran, a country banned from buying weapons, hoping to free American hostages held by Iranian-backed militants. But it didn't stop there. The profits from these illegal sales were funneled to fund the Contras, a rebel group fighting Nicaragua's Sandinista government. Problem was, Congress had already banned U.S. support for the Contras because of their brutal tactics. This secret operation was meant to stay under wraps, but it all came crashing down in 1986. Investigations revealed the tangled web of illegal arms deals and covert funding. National Security Advisor Oliver North became the face of the scandal, facing trials and convictions. Many key players were implicated, including CIA Director William Casey. The fallout was huge, with some convictions overturned and pardons granted, but the damage was done. The scandal exposed dangerous government secrets, challenged the limits of executive power, and left the public questioning the integrity of U.S. foreign policy. 3. The Pentagon Papers. The Pentagon Papers scandal of 1971 was one of the most explosive leaks in U.S. history, revealing deep government deception about the Vietnam War. These classified documents expose the U.S. government's secret history of escalating the war, lying to the public, and misleading Congress, all while secretly expanding military operations into neighboring countries like Laos and Cambodia. By the 1960s, the Vietnam War was a messy, unpopular conflict. The U.S. was heavily involved, supporting South Vietnam in its fight against the Communist North. Public support was fading as U.S. casualties mounted, and the war seemed endless. Meanwhile, key officials within the U.S. government began privately doubting the war's progress and effectiveness. In the mid-1960s, President Lyndon B. Johnson escalated military involvement, but officials like Secretary of Defense Robert McNamara started to question the strategy. The public, however, continued to hear optimistic reports, far from the reality on the ground. The Pentagon Papers, officially titled The Report of the Office of the Secretary of Defense Vietnam Task Force, was a top-secret study commissioned by McNamara in 1967 to analyze U.S. involvement in Vietnam. Spanning over 7,000 pages, the report chronicled the U.S.'s military and political actions from World War II to 1968. It revealed that successive administrations had misled the public, exaggerating successes and hiding failures. The papers uncovered that, even as the U.S. publicly claimed to be achieving victories, it had been secretly expanding its operations, bombing Laos and Cambodia, and secretly supporting the overthrow of foreign governments. The documents also revealed that the Johnson administration had privately believed the war was unwinnable, but kept pushing forward anyway, all while telling the public otherwise. The Pentagon Papers were leaked by Daniel Ellsberg, a former defense analyst and one of the report's contributors. After working on the study, Ellsberg became disillusioned with the war. He realized that the American people were being lied to and decided to act. In 1971, he secretly photocopied the documents and gave them to the New York Times. The newspaper began publishing excerpts on June 13, 1971, and the response was immediate. The revelations were shocking. The Nixon administration, fearing the papers would undermine its credibility, sought to stop the publication, arguing that national security was at risk. The White House filed an injunction to block the New York Times from continuing to print the papers. The legal battle quickly escalated to the U.S. Supreme Court, where the government argued that publishing the Pentagon Papers would endanger national security. However, in a landmark decision, the court ruled in favor of the press, asserting that the public's right to know outweighed the government's concerns about national security. The decision upheld the First Amendment and set a crucial precedent for press freedom in the U.S. Despite the court's ruling, the scandal continued to unfold. The Nixon administration was furious and moved to discredit Ellsberg. It was revealed that the White House had ordered a break-in at Ellsberg's psychiatrist's office, hoping to find damaging information to discredit him. This illegal action was part of a broader effort by the Nixon administration to cover up its mistakes and stop further leaks. Daniel Ellsberg was charged with theft, conspiracy, and espionage, but the trial was never completed. In 1973, the case was dismissed after it was revealed that the Nixon administration had illegally targeted Ellsberg. Ellsberg's act of whistleblowing made him a hero for some and a villain for others, but his courage in exposing the truth had lasting effects on the way the U.S. government was held accountable. The Pentagon Papers leak also played a key role in the unraveling of the Nixon administration, paving the way for the Watergate scandal. The Nixon White House's attempts to cover up the Pentagon Papers leak mirrored the more extensive efforts to cover up the Watergate break-in, which eventually led to Nixon's resignation in 1974.